Welcome to Learn the Word, the daily Bible teaching program of Calvary Chapel of Delta and Pastor Doug McLean. As we pick up in Judges 18 and verse 2, we're going to see what happened as Micah, the Levite, and the tribe of Dan threw off the Lord's direction and followed their own desires.
The Danites were looking for an easier way to get their inheritance. If there had been a king and they had submitted to the Lord as king, then the idea the Lord is saying here is this wouldn't have happened. Look at verse 2. So the children of Dan sent 5 men of their family from their territory, men of valor from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land and search it, and said to them, "Go, search the land." So they went to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. And while they were there at the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. And they turned aside and said to him, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place?" So here's 5 men that come from a territory that Samson later would be born in. And they went on a mission to find land for their people. And they just so happened to come to Micah's house. Micah's house must have been along the road. Everybody keeps showing up at Micah's house. And somehow they hear this Levite. Maybe they heard him praying. Maybe they actually recognized him. But they recognized that he was a Levite. They heard his voice. They recognized it. And so they asked this question that should have been convicting to the Levite. Should have afforded the Levite an opportunity to repent. "Man, what are you doing here? Everybody knows this isn't where you're supposed to be. What are you doing here?" But how ironic. He could have asked them that question. "What are you guys doing here?" Because they weren't where they were supposed to be either. But you know, it's easier to recognize that other people aren't where they're supposed to be than it is to admit that you're not where you're supposed to be. Remember, Jesus taught in Matthew 7 that if you see a little splinter in your brother's eye, you better look at your own, because it's likely you have a big old log hanging out of yours. See, the reason we see sin in other people's lives often is because we're really familiar with the material. "Why are you here?" The Levite should have said, "Why are you here?" Because neither were where they were supposed to be. So the Danites were asking this question that they should have been asking themselves, and the Levite explained his situation, and he said to them, "Thus and so Micah did for me," verse 4. "He has hired me, and I have become his priest." He confessed, "I'm a hireling. It's my job. I'm just making a living. Nothing to do with the Lord's leading, nothing to do with the Lord's calling." Verse 5. So they said to him, "Please inquire of God that we may know whether the journey on which we will go will be prosperous." And the priest said to them, "Go in peace. The presence of the Lord be with you on your way." So when they asked him if they would be successful on their journey, without praying, without pausing, he gave them assurance that they were going the right way and that the Lord would be with them. Just a positive, encouraging message. Yeah, it'll be great. God's with you. Now, they weren't too far from Shiloh. Same territory, remember? They weren't too far from God's true priests. They weren't too far from the tabernacle. They could have gone to Shiloh. Why not? Well, because they were rejecting God's will. They were seeking to move away from their assigned place of inheritance. God's priest would have said, "Go home and take the territory that God gave you." Why would you want to hear that message if you're leaving? But here's this guy that has a positive message. Yeah, you want to go there? Great. It'll go well with you. God's with you, go. Look, people can get itching ears. People can have it in their mind what they want to do, and you have to be careful because there's so many voices out there that people will tell you what you want to hear so that you support them in their ministry or you think they're great. Understand that? If you have something you want to do, there's a temptation to go and find somebody that's going to say, "Yeah, do it." You know, a positive message to make you feel better about whatever, instead of the truth. Well, having received this assurance, verse 7 says, so the 5 men departed and went to Laish. They saw the people who were there, how they dwelt safely in the manner of Sidonians, quiet and secure. There were no rulers in the land who might put them to shame for anything. They were far from the Sidonians, and they had no ties with anyone. Now Laish, about 100 miles from their starting point, way up in the north, up near Mount Hermon in the territory of Naphtali, Sidon, 30 miles to the west on the coast of the Mediterranean. They came up there, looked at these people, and they said, well, this is an easy job. They could be defeated. Nobody's going to come to help. Nobody's going to be there to stand with them. It just seemed like an easier way to get an inheritance. Verse 8, the spies came back to their brethren at Zorah and Eshtaol, and their brethren said to them, what is your report? So they said, arise, let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and indeed it is very good. Would you do nothing? Do not hesitate to go and enter to possess the land. When you go, you will come to a secure people and a large land, for God has given it into your hands, a place where there is no lack of anything that is on the earth. So they brought back this good report. And it is a beautiful place. When we go to Israel, we go up there. And it's one of the places, one of the sources of the Jordan River. Just a beautiful place with the water just flowing. Everything's there. There's an abundance of water, lots of vegetation, just a rich, fertile, lush area. Beautiful place to go. And in fact, Jordan means down from Dan. And this town, Laish, ends up becoming Dan. The counsel of the five was, let's go for it. Verse 11, and 600 men of the family of the Danites went from there, from Zorah and Eshtaol, armed with weapons of war. Please note, they weren't against war. They were simply looking for an easier battle than facing the Philistines. Verse 12, then they went up and encamped in Kiriath Yearim in Judah. Therefore, they call that place Menahem Dan to this day. There it is, west of Kiriath Yearim. And they passed from there to the mountains of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. There they are, Micah's house, right along the road, I guess. Then the five men who had gone to spy out the country of Laish answered and said to the brethren, do you know that there are in these houses an ephod, household idols, a carved image, and a molded image? Now, therefore, consider what you should do. So this is the second stop on their journey. 600 men and their families traveling with them, showing up at Micah's house. When they arrive there, the five spies say, we got to tell you about what's going on in that house. And they told them the whole story about the idols that were there and the priest that was there and the ephod that was there. Verse 15. So they turned aside there and came to the house of the young Levite man, to the house of Micah, and greeted him. The 600 men, armed with their weapons of war, who were of the children of Dan, stood by the entrance of the gate. Can you imagine? 600 men at your gate. Then the five men who had gone to spy out the land went up, entering there, took the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molded image. And the priest stood at the entrance of the gate with the 600 men who were armed with weapons of war. When these went into Micah's house and took the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molded image, the priest said to them, what are you doing? And they said to him, be quiet. Put your hand over your mouth and come with us. Be a father and a priest to us. Is it better for you to be a priest to the household of one man, or that you be a priest to a tribe and a family in Israel? Now, the Levite, this is all going on. He can't do anything to stop 600 warriors from taking what they wanted. And it seemed good to them to take the idol for themselves. And when the priest said, whoa, what are you doing? They said, well, hey, we'll give you a job. It's a better deal. Instead of working for just one family, we got a bigger congregation. It'll be better for you. A tribe instead of a family. Verse 20, so the priest's heart was glad. And he took the ephod, the household idols, and the carved image and took his place among the people. Glad to take their offer. Glad. So much so that he helped the Danites steal from his former boss. That quick, he quits. I'm taking this stuff too. I'm coming with you. Now look, this shows us something. Just really clearly. He didn't care about Micah at all. It was a job to him. And this illustrates what Jesus said in John chapter 10, 12, and 13. John 10, 12, and 13, but a hireling who is not the shepherd, one who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf catches the sheep and scatters them. The hireling flees because he is a hireling and he doesn't care about the sheep. See, a hireling was somebody that was paid to watch sheep. So if his life is in danger or there's something better for him, he just takes off because his primary concern is his own well-being. And that's that Levite. He didn't care about Micah at all. Here's a better job. Here's more opportunity. This looks better for me. I quit. Let's go. And so, verse 21, then they turned and departed and put the little ones, the livestock, and the goods in front of them. They were expecting an attack or a confrontation from the rear. They knew that Micah would be upset when he discovered his gods were gone. And they were right. Verse 22. When they were a good way from the house of Micah, the men who were in the houses near Micah's house gathered together and overtook the children of Dan. And they called out to the children of Dan, so they turned around and said to Micah, "What ails you that you have gathered such a company?" So he said, "You have taken away my gods, which I made." You may want to underline that. "And the priest, and you have gone away. Now, what more do I have? How can you say to me, what ails you?" So Micah gathered his neighbors and went on this mission to try to recover his gods. Isn't that sad? Tremendously sad. He even confessed the foolishness of his own religion. He claimed, "I made those gods." Now you think about that. I made those gods. The gods are being taken away. His gods that he worshiped were less than him. And it's true that a creation is always less than the creator. And now he says, what more do I have? He felt like he was losing everything when he never really had anything before. What kind of gods could be stolen? They're really nothing. And look at this. This man that had stolen from his own mother now ends up a victim of theft. Verse 25. And the children of Dan said to him, "Do not let your voice be heard among us, lest angry men fall upon you and you lose your life with the lives of your household." Then the children of Dan went their way, and when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his house. At this point, might was determining what was right. And Dan won the argument because Micah knew he couldn't win the battle. Verse 27, so they took the things Micah had made and the priest who had belonged to him and went to Laish, to a people quiet and secure, and they struck them with the edge of the sword and burned the city with fire. There was no deliverer because it was far from Sidon, and they had no ties with anyone. It was in the valley that belongs to Beth Rehob. So they rebuilt the city and dwelt there. And they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan, their father, who was born to Israel. However, the name of the city formerly was Laish. So the Danites won the battle, destroyed the city, took advantage of Laish's sense of security and lack of allies, their vulnerability, and they rebuilt the city of Dan. And again, you can visit the ruins of Dan today. And interesting, do you remember when Abraham's nephew Lot was taken captive when he was living in Sodom, and the kings were taking them away? The Bible says that Abraham pursued them as far as Laish. So, and there they've unearthed this 4,000-year-old clay brick gate that you can see, that the same gate that Abraham would have seen when he came to Laish, and it's there to this day up in the north in Israel. Verse 30, then the children of Dan set up for themselves the carved image, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, you may want to circle that, and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land. So they set up for themselves Micah's carved image, which he made all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. So I said to note Manasseh. It's an interesting side note. In the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew text that was done about 200 years before Christ, the Septuagint, and in the Latin Vulgate, the word doesn't say Manasseh there, it says Moses. In the actual Hebrew text, the Hebrew letter nun is hanging above the rest of the word, and it's that nun that makes it Manasseh instead of Moses. So it seems like the scribes were trying to avoid a direct connection with Moses. You know, he's their hero, their lawgiver, not wanting to corrupt his testimony with an idolater. But clearly, from the genealogies, we know that Moses' son's name, one of them was Gershom, as we see here. This is the genealogy of Moses. Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Moses. And that's why the translators into the Septuagint version translated it Moses. Now that tells us some things. It tells us, I think, most significantly, that we're very early in the chronology of the book of Judges. We're at this priest, Moses' grandson. The Danites were the first tribe to embrace idolatry. And they did it as they were seeking an easier way to get what they wanted. And as they did, they embraced idolatry along the way, a man-made religious system, and it would be a constant problem for Dan from this point. This would end up being one of the two cities where Jeroboam set up his 2 golden calves as an alternative religious system for the children of Israel. After Solomon died, the kingdom split, Rehoboam to the south, Jeroboam to the north. Jeroboam recognized that if God's people were coming together and worshiping 3 times a year, that they would be unified. So Jeroboam came up with this idea: we'll provide alternative worship locations. And he devised his own system. And one of the places where he put his system was up there in Dan. The people were already conditioned to it. Idolatry had been there for a long, long time. Now, how does this apply to us? I think you can see in the way the story is lined up that national declension follows a family decline, and families are impacted by individuals. So what you do in your compromise affects your family, and your family's compromise affects our whole nation. We can talk about how terrible our nation is morally and how far we've fallen morally. We got to get back down to us as individuals. It's easy to talk about what they're doing, but it wasn't like the whole nation did this together. It's individuals that are making decisions. And I think this is really germane to us. If you would note 1 John chapter 5, verse 21. John the Apostle, when he was getting older and writing letters to the church, 1 John 5:21, he ended his letter to the church this way: little children, keep yourself from idols. Amen. That's what he said. You have to guard yourself from idols. Paul said it, you need to flee idolatry. Idols are a constant threat to God's people. Why is that? Because it's easier. It's subordinate to man, idolatry, and it offers to satisfy a need, to fill a void. It's something that man makes that's a substitute for what is truly needed. And it's easier to make up your own deal that's convenient for you. Solomon, he went on that journey trying to fulfill the emptiness in his life. And he said, it's vanity, vanity, all is vanity. There's nothing that fills that. And he wrote in Ecclesiastes 3:11, he said, God's put eternity in their hearts, except that no one can find out the work that God does from the beginning to the end. And Solomon just recognized there's something missing. There's a sense of longing. There's a desire for more. There's a sense of missing purpose, of a need for more. And it's all actually the result of the fall, of longing for paradise lost, longing for a spiritual life, a longing for satisfaction and peace and contentment. It's a longing for heaven. It's a longing for home. It's the sense that just things aren't right here. And the Lord set boundaries. He set limitations to help us see that there is more than what we're experiencing. He wants us to know that. All this so that man might grope for God, as Paul said in Athens in Acts chapter 17. So this longing that we have for something more is useful in God's purposes, but you have to understand that it also can be a vulnerability. Jesus is the one that came to bring abundant life, an overflowing life. He came to bring purpose and meaning and reconciliation and peace. And idolatry is an alternative offer to fill that void. And so men invent things, men form things, men pay for things, men invest in things to fulfill that void. And those things are idols. They're idols. And it could be a carved image, but I don't think most people have a little carved image that they're bowing down to. It can, in a broader sense, be any man-made religious system. It can be money. It could be a career. It could be a job. It could be a relationship. It could be a philosophy. Whatever you're looking for to fulfill the void in your life, to try to recover paradise in a sense, whatever becomes your object of worship, it becomes an idol. And it's often appealing and easier than following the Lord. You see, whenever a man makes an idol, he makes it to accommodate his desire, for pride, for comfort, for ease, to have what he wants. Idols fit in your schedule. They're convenient. Idols don't call you to self-denial. They simply promise benefits. And even if they require a price, they still say, well, you're in control and you're going to get a reward that far outweighs the price. Tragically, for Micah, as this ends here, we're told in the last sentence of this verse that the real thing was right in his own neighborhood, less than a 2-hour walk away. But he had to walk if he was going to go to Shiloh. And it would have been better just to have it in your own house, more convenient. And he'd have to give up control if he went to Shiloh, and he'd have to subordinate himself to the Lord. See, it was easier to have his own religion that would operate within his own desires. It would be easier. And it was easier to be in control and do what was right in his own eyes. But what did it get him? Nothing. It got him nothing. He lost it all. See, Dan had an opportunity. Look at the tribe. Dan had an opportunity to have a lasting inheritance, but it was hard. It was challenging. It would be difficult. So they took an easy way and they missed out on their inheritance and they missed a much bigger victory. I want to challenge you today. There's a huge difference between you having a right relationship with God through his son, Jesus Christ, and having an idolatrous relationship with cultural Christianity. You see, there's an idol that presents itself today that says, you set the terms. You're in control. You can have it your way. After all, you're paying. It can use the same terms. It can have the same trappings, but not be real. It comes down to surrender. It comes down to self-denial. It comes down to truly trusting Jesus as Lord. It means coming his way, not your own. Not when his ways are convenient or his ways happen to agree with your ways. It's a willingness to let go when the Spirit and the Word say go. When the Spirit and the Word say, that's got to go, you say, okay. It means a willingness to serve him when it's not convenient and it's not pleasant to your flesh. It means a willingness to give up control because he is Lord, not because he promises to make your life easier or more convenient. I fear that many have embraced ideas that they've fashioned and are satisfied with their own self-serving brand of religious idolatry when the real thing is so very, very close. Look, it happens. Luke chapter 8, a seed falls in shallow soil, rocky soil, and it goes down into the ground and it brings forth life. But the problem is the roots don't go deep. It's just a little bit of soil, so the roots are shallow. There's a hard spot underneath. You can go this far, Jesus, but no more. No more. And then when the word challenges you and says, you know what, that's got to go, that's got to go. There are so many people that says, I'm not giving that up. I'm gone. It's too hard. Yeah, that's the problem. I want to encourage you really to stop and ask yourself, is Jesus really Lord of my life? Is he really Lord? Because if he's Lord, that means he's your master. That means when he says something, you say, yes, sir. Do you blow it? Yeah, we blow it. We're going to be sinners until we see him. But he's still the authority. He's still the authority. And if he says it, then I want him to rule my life. I want him to lead my life. And this is important because Jesus said that you have to confess with your mouth that he's Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead if you want to be saved. He said many people are going to come to him in the last day and say, Lord, Lord, and he'll say, depart from me, I never knew you. And I don't want anybody that comes to this fellowship to be standing before the Lord saying, but I went to Calvary Chapel, and him saying, I don't know you. Who are you? Is Jesus Lord of your life? If not, today's the day to surrender to him, because he loves you and he wants to forgive you. And as this was going on, in Shiloh, sacrifices are being offered that pointed to the sacrifice that Jesus would make for you on the cross, that he would lay down his life for you.
You've been listening to Learn the Word Radio as we near the end of our study through Judges. We're going to continue on into Judges 19 tomorrow. But if you'd like to hear more teaching from Pastor Doug or learn more about us, visit our website, learnthewordradio.com. That's learnthewordradio.com. And be sure to join us next time to continue to learn the Word.